So this is last talk in this hall, and it will be held by Vaidas.
Thank you. So my name is Vaidas Pilkauskas, and I had to pick something which is green for the last talk because I'm going to talk about things that I made myself and I had to learn from them. And I think it's very hard sometimes. It's a hard experience, and I think for many of you, you will also be doing at least some of those things. And so I want to reduce this tension between us. I want to be your friend, and that's why I'm having at least this light green. And I'm a big mountain bicycle fan, rider. I'm not very good rider because, you know, in Lithuania, being downhill rider and not having hills, it's a bit of a challenge, but you know, you can do it anyway. Of course, this is not me, but let's get back to this later. Which color is this? Who can say? Okay, it's either green or black. And this one? But thinking that I'm a coder, I write code. Maybe it's pink. That's probably what I do. I write code and communicate it this way. And can you tell me if this list contains brown color? I really like that projector helps me a lot here. So if you look at the last line, I think everything is very easy. Like we have black, red, gray, and most likely we agree on this. And even projector agrees on that. But if we look on the upper part, it's a bit misleading, right? And it's like a context that matters, the communication that matters, and many things that matter. And sometimes we don't think about it because this is an obvious example. I'm talking about colors. Imagine that someone asks me, like, what color is your sofa? And I reply him or her in an email writing, okay, that's blue, but I use green color for my font. And most likely that person, if she goes to tell this answer to someone else, she will remember that, okay, that was green color. This is how it may be misleading. So think about what you do, and as developers, we sometimes forget those things. And today I'm planning to talk about those things. This is not me. This is actually me. I still managed to find a hill, and actually this is my first competition. And there's a drop or jump that you don't see, and it's quite steep. So someone told me that, okay, my brakes were not warm enough, so that's why I fell down. It may be true, maybe not, but I think there were many things that went wrong, but I still keep doing this thing. And I think you learn a lot from your failures, so don't give up. So it's still green, it's positive. I work for Wix, and in Wix we have amazing software engineering culture. We have many offices in the world. Like many, I mean 3. So we have Tel Aviv office. We have, oh, actually, I lied. We have 4 engineering offices, 2 in Ukraine, and 1 in Vilnius and 1 in Tel Aviv. And we do a lot of interesting things. We're delivering software like multiple times a day, and we're a big company on test-driven development. Probably some of you know me speaking or convincing people how to do test-driven development. So, but this talk is not about that. This talk is, oh, by the way, we are also doing a lot of A/B testing, and I was very, very surprised and pleased that 3 talks in a row they mentioned A/B testing. That's amazing. I couldn't imagine this maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And at Wix we also do a lot of A/B testing, and we also do some open sourcing, and we have some interesting libraries open sourced, and one of them is our A/B testing framework or library. So if you're interested how we do A/B testing, you can go and browse our code or even use it. Maybe use it is a bit like, sounds easy but not that easy, but still like you will learn a lot. I also organize Vilnius Java user group and participate in our community events. So if you don't know Vilnius Java user group or some other communities around, just browse around, Google it, and join it. It's some people even sometimes give a feedback that our meetups sometimes are better than conferences, because we usually have only 2 talks, and those talks are very good. So just come and join us. If you want to learn more, there is usergroups.lt page. Just go and browse. It's a calendar what's going on in Vilnius, and you will probably find Agile Turas in that calendar too. Okay. And you can follow me on Twitter. I wanted to put my link to my blog, but I just understood that for a while I was not writing much there, but still, like, okay, thanks. And do you know what is this? This is an annotation that we usually put above our source code. Like, for example, if I write a class or I have a source file, I just comment something above that, okay, the user is Vaidas _y_. There is a date. Can someone tell which date is this? Or maybe it's a future, or maybe that's, no one knows, like it's a confusing thing. But what I really wanted to say, can you hear me? Okay, so, but what I really want to say that most of you, who uses version control system? Like Git, everyone. So why do you have this one? It's information which is redundant, and you know what's the problem? That I usually mistype it, everyone has its own style, and then when I take your code, which has this thing on top, I'm afraid to change it, because, you know, maybe that says like Vilnius, and I want to maybe improve it. Like a previous speaker said, we are really like putting a lot of effort to improve our code, and I want to improve it, but I think, oh, maybe if I will just delete this nice if statement, maybe I will just insult someone, because there's a name. This is, you are not your code. So don't put this thing, because it might be misleading. It doesn't mean anything, because, like, for example, if you have a version control system, just look who actually worked on that file, and probably you'll find people who are up to date. And don't forget one more thing. We write code for our humans, not for machines. Machines care only about bytecode or something which is like sub-product of our code. We write code so that we are able to read it. And if you haven't read this book, I think this is a must for every software engineer. I think Lisp is popular just because of this book, or at least used to be popular, I don't know. So just read this book. So, who reads your code? Of course, I will read my code. I write it, and then come back it, and we spend much more time reading it. Then, in the future, like maybe a week after or tomorrow morning, I will also get back to my code, and I don't want to look at something which is cryptic. And by the way, code sounds like some cryptic thing that is hard to translate into human language, but think about a message about communication. Also your users, like now it's open source world. Like if I use some library, I usually like, maybe there is a missing documentation. Maybe I really want to understand how security features work in that code, and I go just read it. Okay, they don't support this Cypher. Okay, fine. I just read it, and if that's easy to read, like I quickly get this information. Contributors, like if that's again an open source project, don't make them think about what is the right way to contribute source code to your source code or something. Just like think about them. And of course, future maintainers, like this is my style. This is my style how I do something, and then I leave to another team. And then maybe Vilnius or someone else takes over my code and says, oh my God. So don't think about those people. And today I'm going to speak about readable code. And what I mean with readable code, I'm not going to speak about design today. I'm going to speak about something that we rarely speak, or we think that, okay, tools will do this for me. For example, linter will solve this problem. But my goal is to point to some places where you should still consider things that would improve or maybe missed opportunity to ease our lives as developers, as readers of our code. So first thing, it's like a summary of what I want to say today. You need to think about reading. You need to cleanly edit. Like clean means hygiene. For example, would you read an article in newspaper if that would be like, it would miss some punctuation things, or would miss some, would be misedited. Like, for example, it would contain additional spaces somewhere. You would just quickly notice that this is not a quality professional work. And most important part of this is explicitly structured. If I have a structure, I want it to work the way that you can look and understand how things relate together in the code. It's very close to design, but it's not design yet. If I have a function and that function calls something else, I want to see this immediately, not just like spend time and guess, okay, or maybe miss that something like that happens. I want to be very explicit in my code. Okay, imagine situation. I have a table. This is a conference. I drink a coffee, and I leave my coffee glass here. It's like an empty. What will happen after maybe five minutes? This table probably will be full of such cups, right? It will attract our thing to this table. There is a concept which is called, or metaphor maybe, which is called broken window syndrome. If we have neglected building and someone walks by, maybe named Vilnius, and throws a stone, and then we have a broken window. Usually what happens, in some time, all the windows will be broken. So what governments usually do, they put a lot of effort to recognize such neglected places, and they keep additional maintenance to ensure that you don't have any broken windows anymore. Like, because the broken window says that, okay, rules are broken. And when rules are broken, it doesn't matter if the district is poor district where maybe people are less educated or they don't follow laws sometimes. The same thing, slightly in different way, works also for rich districts. Because, you know, in rich districts, like, we make money, like money, 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 and then you see an opportunity to do something crazy and you just, bam, there is another window broken. So the same thing applies to code. Also, one more thing that I want to tell you. I give you a lot of metaphors. You can use each of those metaphors like as a pro and as a cons. For example, I can say, okay, this is good. Like, I can find a way how to use this. Like, if I have like a place of code which will attract maybe someone who is not following the rules, maybe that's a good thing. Like, maybe that's a person who is going to contribute. But on the other hand, like each metaphor you can use like one way or another way. It's your choice how you're going to use it. My goal is to illustrate the idea that I'm going to speak. And when I speak about broken window and clean thing, I want to be able to notice such thing very quickly. If there is a mess around, I just make a hack, I ship it to production, fine, go home. And most likely it will work for half a year. And then when Vilnius joins, I may be on vacation, and he says, oh, come on, who did it? And there is a annotation on top saying that someone else's name, and okay, that dude, like, oh. So I want this effect immediately. I want to recognize what's wrong with my code. Once I wanted to contribute to one library, I'm not going to mention it. You can maybe spot the name. And I said, okay, I'm going to send a small patch. And then I opened their open source, their source on GitHub. And, you know, I've seen broken formatting there. And you know how I was feeling about it. Like, if I send a pull request to them, and maybe I will use spaces, and they will reply to me, okay, why do you use spaces? Because we just moved to tabs. I will feel very stupid. I don't want, as a contributor, to get in such a situation. I want code hygiene to encourage me to participate. Now it's like I feel unsafe because if I will submit something, maybe I'm doing wrong and I don't have a way to easily understand if this is a correct way to do or no. So just think about it. It's a small detail, but it will help. Like simple linter may help in this place. And someone asked me, like, do you have cat pictures? And in big organization like Wix, where we have like hundreds of developers, we have teams, and those teams work like maybe in some non-formal ways. Because, for example, if I work with Vilnius, we agreed on something, but then comes someone else, and they, okay, we want some, like, for example, Vilnius works on Node platform, he writes JavaScript, and someone comes and says, okay, let's add this feature, let's support this, and Vilnius says, yeah, finally someone is contributing, and then the contribution is completely broken. Like, you know how Vilnius feels? He says, wow, it's a good contribution, but I really don't want to explain such obvious things because, you know, saying that your pull request is bringing good feature, but then, you know this but part. If you do something and you then say but, everything that was before but, it's actually wrong. That's how it works. Like, if you're like a manager, always think about giving feedback. Like, if you have this but, and if that but is a simple thing that just breaks hygiene, it just like eliminates everything that happens, everything good that happened before. And I believe that Vilnius doesn't want to deal with this. And for us, it's like, you know, we put a lot of heart of ours like into the code that we write, and then someone comes and like breaks our rules, breaks our safety. Let's talk about comprehension. Yes, it's 6 for those who are not colorblind. I intentionally took this one, so I wanted to communicate like, I just want to say 6, but I did it in the hardest way possible. In some context, maybe communication is just to understand if you're colorblind. But usually you just want to say 6. Don't let your code go into this situation. Like, remove everything that distracts, that obfuscates your code. So let's talk about long lines. This is pretty nice code on our open source library, and at Wix we use it a lot. And, you know, like, okay, long lines, but I managed to get a computer which has a slightly too narrow screen. And, you know, to understand the whole line, I need to scroll. This is maybe not so bad, but then we do a lot of pair programming. I asked a colleague to sit next to me and like, let's fix a bug, because I think this place may not work as we expect. And he says, okay, can you scroll it a little bit? Like, he has to give command to me, because I owned keyboard at that time. scroll it a little bit, and then I scroll it a little bit, and then I feel that he's like already forgetting what happens in this left part, and he doesn't want to say that, okay, my memory is short, can you scroll it back? And like, he feels uncomfortable. So when you think about long lines, think about someone who is going to read it. It was very easy to write. It even has some structure. And long lines not always work from optimization point of reading. Like, so this is the instruction. And think about it. I have a big monitor, and I want to use that monitor for multiple tools, because like that's what it is for. Like, I have more space to do more work at the same time to get more feedback. If I want to open another file just to see, like, okay, there's a problem, and this is that problem relates to that problem this way, let me do it. Like, now it's very hard to work with the first file on the left. Another situation is very similar. Like, I have an IDE, and that IDE has a lot of support for me. And then also long lines do not work anymore. And I occasionally give presentations. And I wanted to talk about this part because I think there happens a lot of things that are important to this code. And you know, if I enter presentation mode, I increase the font, it doesn't work anymore. Am I going to scroll this code? I will probably pick another code example. Let's talk about newspaper metaphor. And from newspaper metaphor, I want you to pay attention to columns. What is interesting about columns is that the lines are very short. So for example, if I have very short attention span, I can read a line and maybe not lose attention. And if I have short attention span and the line is like this, I will probably read up to the middle point, then notification comes, I look at my phone, and oh, and I have to restart again. And this is distraction-friendly mode. So this works fine. Historically, this layout of newspapers was not meant to improve reading. It was meant to improve advertising. We have columns in newspapers just because it's easier to put images, advertisements, and so on. But there is a story from the history. Who knows what fanzine is? Okay, so a few. And fanzine is like, imagine, like maybe in 80s or 90s, where like internet was not commodity that you can have at every home. And radio was ubiquitous, like pop songs playing and like, but if you don't like pop songs, maybe you like disco, German disco, as our keynote speaker said, then there is no way to exchange this information. And people decided, okay, we need to have alternative press, non-official one. So this one is from Lithuania. It was meant for alternative music fans, and it was released like in small numbers and in very small size. You can see it from the screen, but this font is very small, maybe 6 point or something like that. And what columns allowed for people that you could use very, very small format and put a lot of information just to save resources, because you need to make copies of this on your own, and it costed a lot and so on. So what they learned, they used the same approach as newspapers do. And now, the last example about really important thing. Many of us use GitHub to review our pull requests. And when you send a pull request and I'm a reviewer and I have to scroll, sometimes I just don't want to scroll. I just like scroll down and that's it. Like review is not complete and it's a bit like insulting, offending. So the question is how long? I think we can argue about many things like how long it can be. Just probably stick with some defaults like GitHub, IntelliJ, they have 120. It used to be popular to have 80. If you break at 80, it's more than better, but it's very hard if your language is verbose like, I don't know, Java maybe, or some typed language. Sometimes it's very hard to fit, and if you split your lines, it becomes harder to read. Another thing, let's talk about visual noise. Most of those things are very obvious. So like inconsistency, like I've shown wire mock example where spaces, tabs in one place, I don't know which one is right, how to write my own code. Unconventional style, tool warnings. Warnings is what we are going to talk next. And like even simple things like excessive empty lines. Like imagine that you just write a source code and for some reason like you have 3 lines, empty lines between some methods. Is this an accident or was that intentional? So you force your reader to think about those things. They are distracting. They forced to come up with something that maybe was not even true. Unused imports, it's obvious ones, like just don't have them. And unformatted code, like linter or automatic formatter is a very good thing to have. Let's talk about warnings. What's wrong with this? I have a lot of visual noise, and you can see that everything here is yellow. Yellow in this ID means warning, which means that my build still works, but it like compiler or the tool thinks that there's something potentially wrong with my code. Sometimes those things are actually not wrong. It's just like my configuration. Maybe my linter is configured the way which is not compatible to use cases that I'm solving. And maybe there is something that is really important and I cannot see it because I have a lot of false positives. So it just distracts me all the time and I don't see what's important here. And now look as an like alternative where you don't have any warnings anymore. Now we can talk if this code is good. Like I'm not distracted about small details which will take a lot of time from me. And it's very easy to configure our tools or enforce some rules like linter or whatever, like some automation would help to deal with those noisy things. So let's talk about ignoring warnings. If you ignore warning, you already have broken window effect in place. Like you have a warning, and it just attracts our bad behavior or our warnings. Like the more you have, if you add more, doesn't matter anymore. False warnings hide important ones. Those warnings are for a reason. Like you have a tool and you want the tool to help you create better software. And if you just misuse it, you don't get this feedback anymore. It works like a distraction. Okay, this is a warning, by the way, and this is is this false alarm or no? So
are we safe in Vilnius?
So we get those warnings, and how many of you actually ignore those warnings? Many of us, just because they don't work. We just stop trusting them. And the tool that we have, we pay a lot of money to support this, it doesn't work anymore. Also, another important thing is that when you have distraction, the distraction comes and says, look at me, look at me. You just look at the distraction and lose context a little bit. You have to come back to your work and This way you just constantly get distracted by warnings. Also, inbox zero problem. If you have 2 emails in your inbox, you can quickly go and read them. If you have thousands of unread emails in your inbox, you just, oh, I cannot do this anymore. Like, just keep going. And for example, if some important thing comes and you just cannot reply it, probably you'll forget about it. Just keep your warnings to 0. Now, how to deal with that? So, of course, the best option is to fix the code. Like, if the code is broken, just fix it. Another thing is, like, disable those warnings if they are just like, for example, many people here, I believe, they have disabled those mobile warnings just because they don't work and they just make noise in the middle of the conference and so on. Just doesn't help. Also ask vendor to provide good defaults. For example, at Wix, we don't have common style for our JVM platform, and we just install the tool and use the default configuration. And sometimes, when vendor releases new versions, those defaults change, and it may become a problem. So what we do, submit an issue to their book tracker so that they would at least reply that they're not going to fix it. And in some cases, it actually worked. IntelliJ applied different configuration just because someone was asking, and it's a good way to go. Let's talk about logic. So if penguins are black and white, some old TV shows are black and white, therefore some penguins are all TV shows. That's a broken logic. So let's talk about illogical code structure. I think this is the most important part of the presentation, and let's quickly define what's the logical structure. The logical structure is a group of elements that are at the same abstraction level. So for example, if you have a class and you have methods, those methods, they are on the same abstraction level. If you have method and that method has parameters, those parameters form the same logical group in the same abstraction level. My question is, how many parameters does this expression take, like this call to set aspect? It's very hard to say, right? So this bold part is a logical group. It's a call to set aspect method. Now, this one, including parents, is another logical group. It's like group on its own. It doesn't matter how many parameters are here. We just know that set aspect will take parameters. Now, what's inside those, inside this group is another logical group, which is formed of individual parameters. And now we can see that this is only one single parameter here, which, if we recurse deeper, takes also parameters and so on and on. And this is how things relate. And now we can tell that this is a single parameter. We, as humans, we look for symmetry. For example, if I meet some friend of mine and I see him coming from the distance, I usually, okay, I try to recognize him. How my brain works, it just scans his head, and I see half of it, and then quickly just decide what the other half is. So we look for symmetry, and sometimes, like, we just, like, even if you think about it, like, like, if you look at someone and you don't analyze it much, everything looks very symmetrical, just because the way our brain optimizes it. The same thing is required in our code. It works like a guideline. If I open a brace somewhere, I just look for closing one. If you remove it, then my brain cannot understand where to put the other half. So for example, if I meet someone, I see one half, and maybe just enough to see where his like left ear is. And I just rebuild the whole face in my brain. Let's refactor that code. let's make it a bit more structured. It looks like it's a bit longer, but that's a great feedback about our code. When it was like 5 lines, it looked okay. I can't understand it, but like Uncle Bob said, like no more than 5 lines. Fine, I'm compliant. Now, if I restructure it and I try to understand the deepness of it, and I see that, okay, maybe web on its own is too complex. And set aspect is very simple. And if you use like language like Scala, you can use named parameters. Or you can refactor it this way, because original code was this one. Maybe we only care about this one, because I want to make a set aspect call, and I need to understand that it takes an aspect, not something which is very complex. Also, you see, deep nesting. This is a flying geese problem. The more nesting you have, the more complex the code is. Like every nesting, it adds additional dependency on something. And it's very hard to notice this if you're just like not following structure of this code. So explicit structuring allows me to see how things relate together. And of course, like where to put the last brace. I'm not going to argue about any of those things. I just want you to think a little bit. For example, if we have JSON, we usually don't format it this way, right? If we have XML, this one looks awkward. If we have braces, closure programmers, anyone here? So just think about it. Probably you will not agree in your team about this code style. Oops, sorry. But this looks consistent only if you do our things this way. So think about it. Like this is how our brains work. They look for similarities, for patterns. Let's talk about tools and formatting. We have a class or a constructor in this case, and we decided, okay, because in some IDEs you just can rename your objects from many places that you have in a code. And what I do, I just rename message. And I'm not in this file. I just rename that object in its definition file, and my tool goes through all the files and does this rename. And what just happened is that this thing got misaligned. What if I format it this way? Then I can do this as much as I want. Because everything, like the name, the parents, and parameters, they are on their own logical group. Let's quickly go through examples. I'm running out of time. So examples. This is also logical group. I have dot, dot, dot. This is like a chaining. And I've split it like in arbitrary place. It's a broken chain logic because I don't know why this split happened. Is it because I'm running out of line length, or because this copy is like different abstraction level? So one way is to solve it this way. If you want maybe to have contact and details as a thing on its own, extract a variable. You can do it also this way. This is probably the most common thing, enums. If you have enum and you have read, write, pause, and then stop on the another line, you may ask yourself, why the heck stop is different from those three? And even worse, if you group them, read, write, pause, and stop like this, and someone says, okay, please add a fifth state, where do I add it? Is there like a logical connection between those? I don't know, because this looks very clean, right? It looks like a square. Nice, like clean code. Just try to communicate with your structure what you actually mean. Don't add implicit meaning to it if it doesn't have it. Also, like, typical examples. It looks terrible, right? Because I have more code now, but it brings me some feedback that maybe I need to refactor something, or maybe this code is just too complex. Also, like this one, you can have 3 different ways. And question is, can structure be automated? Can you use a linter to solve all of this? For most of the things, yes. For example, editing things like 2 spaces in a row, you don't want to deal with that manually. But how do you structure your parameters? Where do you place names and so on? Maybe it's somewhere in the middle. I just want you to think about it. Just thinking forces you to criticize your linter. Sometimes we pick one linting style over another one, and this is where I think we should think sometimes. Because something that worked in 70s may not work in 2000 or 10 or 12, 17, 18, and so on. Like, time changes. People flew to the moon long time ago. Would you flew with the same apparatus again? I don't know. Just ask yourself this. And don't forget, everything that I said, it just has it works only in context. And I don't want to offend you, but there are other ways to communicate. And if you don't know who this guy is, this is Linus Torvalds, the author of Linux operating system. And he was very frustrated because many companies don't pay a lot of attention to Linux. And he said, in this time, NVIDIA, what's up? Like, why are you not paying attention to us? And it worked, because it drew a lot of attention from the press and so on. There are ways to put emphasis on what is important in your code, in what you do. Just think about what you communicate. And don't forget that code comprehension is named abstractions, which is design. This is what many people talk when they talk about this, design. For example, how to name things, how to remove duplication. So those are named abstractions. And code structure is what I've been speaking today. Thank you.
Do you have questions for Vaidas?
Or I will have questions for you.
You gave an example where you wanted to contribute to open source project, but it was badly formatted. What was the outcome? What choice did you make? Did you submit the patch anyway? And what do you think of the philosophy of governing open source project, which says that even if the patch is badly structured, it should be merged anyway if it's not malicious, and if community cares enough, they will submit another patch, and that should send a message to the person who submitted a badly structured code.
So my answer to the first part is that I didn't submit a patch. It was not so important. I just happened to be browsing that part, and I thought, okay, I want to understand if I can just morph that library and maybe use in my own project. I was doing it after hours, so maybe that was the cause why I didn't do it, because like I just found a barrier, and I said, okay, come on, next time. And the second part of the question, like, I think it's a good question. I really want to accept submissions, but then if you send me, for example, code which is written in your style, am I able to rewrite it to conform to project style? That is the dilemma, because if you send me some code and I'm just going to write everything, you will feel like, come on. And sometimes it happens, like you send a patch and someone just takes out maybe ideas from the patch, they write their own patch and they submit it to the code. I don't know if I answered your question, but it's a hard question. It's like social thing. As a open source owner, I always want to communicate my expectations as quickly as possible and as clearly as possible. Because if I will just tell you how I want patch to look like, maybe you will not even come in, we will not meet in this situation. And I think it's better because, like, you know, it's easier for us to sit next to each other and talk. When you submit your patch over the network, all emotions, everything is on both sides, and it's easy to be misunderstood. We lose we lose a lot of non-verbal communication things.
More questions?
It's close to time to wake up because this is the last talk in this audience.
If I am really messy developer, and I want to fix my code, so from where I should start? Maybe your suggestion, like from warnings, from fixing clients, or restructuring code? Because you cannot take everything at once.
Of course, like this is also a good question because think about it. Like you just heard someone say, okay, if you put like some brace on this place, it's bad, and you come home and you have like million line of code base. Maybe you automate, and what happens? It looks like there is one developer who changed most of the code after this change. So don't touch something that works, but touch in situations when you really see a value. For example, you're adding feature. You're doing something that is important to that code. Just don't mess around with small things. And every change is an investment, and if you contribute something, it's a risk. So it's of course depends on you. Like if you're, I don't want to say that those people who write that code, they are messy. Maybe they don't have time to think about those things, because it's a small detail. If I can think about it, maybe I can do it. But if I don't think that it's important, no one told me, maybe I'm wrong telling you. You have to make your mind yourself.
Thank you. So if no more questions, so thank you, Vaidas, for sharing your experience.
Thank you.